has been a lot of issues that have emerged from this discussion. It's impossible for me to summarize everything, but I think there are 3 points that can emerge or can emerge very clearly. The first thing that is we cannot go on with business as usual or doing nothing. That the cost of business as usual or doing nothing is far greater than trying to do something. And that this something should go beyond, as Dominique was saying, the normal horizontal sprinkling of resources towards a more targeted, vertical sort of policy through an entrepreneurial discovery approach, or the discovery process. Also that this is not going to be easy. That, as Boschma was saying, and Peiranez was shown, this is about not just going to build specializations, but breaking out of old specializations, looking for new directions, but starting on the basis of whatever potential already exists. And that, I think, is important from what Fabrizio said, is it has to be passionate. It cannot be done on a whim by technocrats like, let's say most of ourselves. I would probably exclude Fabrizio from this table. It has to lead a heated debate. It has to challenge the elites. It has to attack and undermine the position of rent seekers, and it has to be monitored, both, I would say, externally but internally. But without wanting to preempt the debate, I think the four people have intervened, have raised a lot of questions, have challenged a lot of ideas or pre-established ideas, and I would like to open the floor for questions to the audience. My idea would be to try to collect a few questions, and since we're running late, and I'm sure that you all want to have a bit of lunch before we start the afternoon section, then have a final round of presentations and response to questions by the members of the panel. So, who would like to start with the first questions? Please, Roberta.
Well, first of all, thank you very much to the panel, because...
Excuse me, Roberta. I think that everyone knows who you are in the audience, but just in case, just state who you are and where you come from.
Roberta Capello, Polythecnique di Milan. First of all, thank you very much to all of you for the very clear presentation of these new, at least in Italy, as Fabrizio was mentioning, it's not very well discussed, of this new policy design and policy approach. I have a general question for the three speakers, and then a particular question for the last speaker. To the first three speakers, I would like, well, what you said is totally shareable. I mean, the points, the good points of the smart specialization strategy are totally shareable, and I agree with you. Of course, you have started thinking about it already since some years. So I'd like you to tell us which are, from your point of view, the weak points that are still there in order to implement this strategy, where theoreticians or scientists could work on it and could, let's say, add some particular. So where are the weak points in this relatively positive new framework, policy framework that you presented us? The second more specific question is for Inmaculada. You presented, let's say, a map telling us where something is happening. Could you have or give us already some ideas on a success story of smart specialization, and especially which are the main, let's say, crucial points in order for a smart specialization policy to be a success story and a success? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Roberta. More questions from the audience? We have today a relatively quiet audience, so
Thank you very much. I would like to raise just one point.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Fabrizio from the Second University of Naples. I was saying that I guess it would be very interesting to connect the the notion of smart specialization and the problem of the economic crisis. I mean, it would be interesting and important to understand if a region which follows a smart specialization profile is more vulnerable to idiosyncratic shocks than less developed region. You know the notion of granularity in business cycle theory developed by delle. So now people are aware that an idiosyncratic shock, a shock which hit a single firm, single big firm, might diffuse all over the economy. And the higher the interconnections between the sectors and the firms within a region, within an economy, the higher is the speed of the diffusion of this negative or positive shock. So my question is a $1 million question, or if a highly specialized region is more vulnerable than less smart specialized region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's a question at the back of the theatre.
Davide Valerzi, Dipartimento di Scienze Economiche, Università di Padova. I knew the existence of economic and financial elites. Today I heard also the fact that can be qualified by saying that there are regional local elites. So my question to the panel is, could we elaborate a little bit more about the relationship between these local elites, which are presented very much, at least in the first presentation, as an obstacle to smart specialization, and the role of local actors, which remains so fundamental in smart specialization.
Any other questions from the audience? So I'm going to take the prerogative as moderator of this and ask a question. I just came back, in fact, I was going to say last night, not the day before, from the Cohesion Forum, Sixth Cohesion Forum that took place in Brussels, in which the new policy was presented, as well as the Sixth Cohesion Report, and that includes a significant part that is linked to smart specialization. And there were quite a few complaints by the regions about the complexity of the process and the bureaucracy involved, and significant calls coming from mainly Spanish but also German regions for a simplification. I would like to ask the members of the panel in this respect, to what extent or why do we need greater complexity, what are the advantages, and what might be the drawbacks, and can this complexity not be simplified? So that's the challenge. I think there's a right number of questions. What are the weak points for the implementation linked to the complexities from Roberta Capello? What are the success stories? What is the relationship between smart specialization and the economic crisis? Can this represent a reply to the crisis, and to what extent that's the case? And if you can elaborate more on the role of local elites as obstacles for the implementation of a smart specialization strategy. If you allow me, I'm going to go in the reverse order to the presentations. So I'd like to start with Inmaculada and finish up with Fabrizio.
Thank you, Andres. I would like to answer the question of Roberta. I would not dare to but based on the OPs and strategies that I had the opportunity to assess, I would say that some of the main crucial points are to justify in a clear way how the priorities have been selected and what kind of intervention, policy intervention is going to take place. Because sometimes the information provided or the analysis provided in the first part of the operational programs are not really connected with the intervention logic. Another critical point I would say, as I'm saying, is just based on the OPs and strategies I had the opportunity to read. There is not clear monitoring and evaluation mechanisms in place. There are some features, but they are not a strong monitoring and evaluation mechanism. It's not clear who is going to take the responsibility of assessing the real implementation of the strategy. And finally, something I personally put a lot of emphasis is in the entrepreneurial discovery process itself. Because sometimes we find that in the strategies, the regions and the countries, they make references to the stakeholders that they have involved, but there is no clear indication or information on how their opinions are taken into account in the decision-making process. Because one thing is, and that's my personal opinion, one thing is to say, okay, we really invite people from the business sector, we really invite people from the academic sector, but then we make the decision that we think is the best. And another thing would be to, for example, to create a co-decision mechanism in which you can find a balance between the power of one sector and another.
Right now. Well, there are many. Sometimes I'm asked to go to a region and then we talk about, okay, what could be done, and then local stakeholders are also present. And what I always found very difficult to handle is how to control those vested interests, how to keep out rent-seeking behavior, because all those just come to those sessions because they want to make sure that their interests are served. So they're not so interested in when I tell them, okay, you have to make crossovers and relate to others, because it's not easy to convince them in that respect. But still, you want them to be involved somehow, because and this is especially true, of course, for lagging regions when you have only a few players that really matter. And in those regions, we also know that there are quite strong and rigid networks in which those stakeholders really are important and dominate what is going on in that network. So that is really hard to break. I'm not sure, but I think when you implement a smart specialization process, try to make them involved, but monitor all the time that they're really focused on renewal and innovation, and that this should be about diversification. And the second thing I would like to stress is what I think could work is to provide them with very simple examples where in fact crossovers between activities have been successful in the past. Just very simple ones. I think Dominique was referring to biotech and fishery, right? So if you really have those showcases and you really could explain that to them, I think it might really trigger ideas and new initiatives. But of course, this should also be supported by public money. It's not just the case that it's just about coming together and think about strategies, but I think also they must have the feeling that also public policy is really interested in that and provides also the necessary finance and resources, but of course on the conditions that are in line with the objectives of the policy. Then the issue about the economic crisis, and the question about resilience. To me, what I don't like about the current economic analysis on resilience, that it is always very defensive, in the sense that it is always about how to overcome a shock, right? And how to overcome an economic crisis, as if it's just a matter of going back to the previous output. For me, it's more a matter of, and this is in line with what I presented, it's more of how a shock really affects your capabilities to diversify into new directions, because in the end, to overcome a shock is really about working on your competitiveness and your capability to diversify into new directions. So in my view, if I go back to my illustration and to my network, I'm more interested to see how the economic crisis affected my network, which nodes disappeared, and how that affected the potential of a region to diversify in new directions. So then you make an immediately relationship between resilient policy on the one hand and competitiveness policy on the other hand. And this is what we were so missing in the economic crisis, when only looking at the historical measures. Competitiveness was out of that discussion. And I think we should do a much better job in that respect. And maybe here there's something to be learned from. Yeah, I think that is.
Thank you very much, Ron. And the floor is to Dominique.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the question. I'd like to start with the good question of our chairman. Do we need a greater complexity, in terms of policy design, etc.? So I said yes. I said yes because our idea, our objective was, let's provide regions with new tools to really have strategic influence about the future. Where do we want to position ourselves in the knowledge economy? Where are the domains, etc.? So they need strategic tools and visions for that. But having said that, of course, we know from the 70s, 80s, 90s experiments in terms of top-down, centralized sectoral policy that it has been a failure. Not all the time, to be fair. I had a special issue with Dave Mowry and Dick Nelson in research policy, where we show a good example of this kind of mission-oriented policy. But in general, we know also that this kind of top-down sectoral policies, which were designed to protect insiders and the local elite from competition from outsiders, etc. So why complexity? Because we want to solve an oxymoron, actually, which is let's give the regions these strategic decisions and visions, but let's protect also what we are seeking now is the main engine of course. This is entrepreneurs' innovation, decentralized experiment, freedom to experiment, etc. And so these two things are in tension, at least. And then the complexity is there. And at the academic level, we solved it with the magical notion of entrepreneurial discovery, but then at the practical level, it's of course more difficult. But I think the complexity is also the result, maybe, of precisely years of business as usual kind of policy. Because, and here I'm coming to the weakness that you Roberta, mentioned. When I was interacting with a lot of regions in France, it was clear that they produce a lot of analysis, SWOT. The commission asked for that, actually. I'm not sure it's a good idea, actually. But so SWOT matrix of everything. So there is a market for consulting companies, which trying to find the strengths and the weakness of the region. And at the end, when I was in Aquitaine, in Alsace, in Ile-de-France, Rhône-Alpes, etc., they all ended up with something which was very similar. Health, environment, energy efficiency, which are not the smart specialization of a region. This is just, a kind of societal challenges, priorities. It's good to have this information because, of course, these challenges are the environment where we are. But this is a kind of top-down, thinking about the main challenges. But then the smart specialization and technical discovery has to come from the bottom up, etc. And it might be more simple, rather than having this very complex matrix, etc. We keep saying the regional, and let's just observe, listen, detect what is happening. In many regions, natural discovery is happening all the time. it's not, you know, something so difficult. You know, I have very good examples in my new little book of entrepreneurs thinking of a diversification path, you know. Just because I was in Portugal recently, so I worked on this. Entrepreneurs having a molding company, you know, declining markets in the glassmaking industry. So he discovered a new diversification path, which was the plastic industry. This was, you know, a long time ago. But this is a discovery. This is not a big thing. It is just, you know, exploring a path of transformation. It happens all the time. The idea is just to detect, to observe, and to support the most promising things. So we don't probably need all this very complicated approach, etc., etc. Also, again, you know, I have to keep my friend in the commission. It's useful. It's useful to know, etc., everything. So the weakness is still at this thing, the regional, you know, cabinet is always thinking he has the window. It has the window, and so which is not that. So the discovery process is part of the policy. Two final things. Another weakness is that a lot of people have understood smart specialization as sectoral specialization. I'm choosing tourism, textile, etc., agri-food, etc., which is not, because if you specialize, if you support one sector, this creates distortion, because then you help all companies just because they are from the sector. And from an innovation policy, just meaningless. What you want to support, this is the companies which are committed in a new activity in this sector, like textile company, you know, developing advanced manufacturing technologies. You don't want to support the sector, but this activity. And so the level of granularity is not the sector, but this activity level. You know, biotech for fisheries or advanced manufacturing technologies for footwear industry, etc. So this level is very important because people are thinking in terms of sectors when we are talking of smart specialization. And finally, an idea which is, I think, key, which help policymakers, is that we are not in a Ricardian world where specialization are taken for granted. One say that, you know, this is evolutionary, so it is a living document. And actually, after 5 years, your priority is should not be longer priority because the activity is no longer new. Whatever it failed or it succeeded, it should go out of the strategy, and so the region has to find new options, and so you have this evolutionary diversification path. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dominique. So I pass the microphone to Fabrizio.
I will, but first, a word myself on the simplicity and complexity, picking up on your point, on which I fully agree. The problem is that since ex ante, there is this temptation, enormous temptation. When for public administrators, which are honest and don't want to be captured, to turn, and they sense that there is a complexity in the process, they don't want to leave to themselves and to other public administrators so much discretionality. So what happens in the complexity of the reality, in which you can possibly not create a taxonomy which is exhaustive of all the nodes which are there, or all the possible varieties of textile, there's this enormous temptation of creating taxonomies. A platform where there's a taxonomy, and that turns into procedure. And that is the kind of procedure to which I think the regions are reacting. This policy calls for discretionality. I don't see how it cannot be done through discretionality. You need high quality of card of the public administration that are not told at the beginning of the game through a guideline. The guideline has to be the general principles, but the implementation differs from any area to any other area according to the resistance, to the nature of the nodes, of the connectivity with outside. And this desperate attempt to setting a blueprint is what creating a procedural administrative complexity, which makes everything, and so people spend an enormous amount on the administrative procedure, forget to discuss those 4 principles. So in my view, you said a very important thing. The policy is already, how do you say, the process of identification and the process of transformation is itself the policy. While this is not the case, the implementation is not considered to be. So you want to do everything ex ante. While the idea is that you high discretionality with then, as I say that with Teresa, working together, on these issues with high exposed monitoring. So you want to be sure that high discretionality, but then telling you what you're doing, what's happening, what are the results, what's going on, what is really changing. So to unload the ex-ante process and to load the ex-post process. On the local actors are the local actors that have the knowledge, a partial knowledge, and undetected knowledge, a knowledge of which of whose relevance they are themselves not fully aware, because the process happens every day, as you say, but sometimes it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen because there is not even a conviction that you do have a fantastic knowledge for that particular product. You're not aware that there is a high demand international for something that you do have, and you see all the time. I mean, I've been looking, since I'm working a lot in internal areas, I see a lot in agro-food, which is obviously the only thing which is really strongly alive in Italy. And then it turns out it has macro effects. Look at the numbers for employment. And why is it alive? Because if you look to the local level, you see an enormous creative process of discovery of what you have, going back to the suddenly discovering that Italy has a tradition and a potential, that you do have an alternative potential for these very specific demand of people with all sorts of troubles, that they can't eat A, B, C, and D, and that there was a pasta, there was a particular kind of grain, and then you do discover, you do have potential, you do have technology, you then have a contact with university, but this is all happening. These are the local actors, okay? Have the knowledge. The local elites sometimes those who have come out of the previous transformation, you know, the policy is about identifying existing structure then to transform it. These are people who often come out of the previous transformation, and they are now sitting on the golden egg, which are rotting, and they don't want to change. So the risk of this policy is they're happy with half of it. They listen to, oh, this is vertical, this is about picking up existing structure, but they don't want to stop there. They want only the first part of what it will say. They don't want the transformation. So they want the money for it. This is what the local elites do. And it is particularly true in a country which was not particular, horizontal policies were never particularly fashionable, so we never moved out of vertical. But vertical was the old top-down, picking the winner through people who don't even know how to pick the winner, because sometimes there are episodes in which good winners were picked. I mean, pick the losers was actually often the case. So, the misconception and the opposition, so you have funny, well-based opposition, and I mean, the opposition that you quoted, the good part of the academia in this country, which is well-meaning, not liking this stuff, because it's honestly terrified that it brings back the old story. So, and so that's why the work is even harder. The last point is on myself on the first question. So, so there are several obstacles. An obstacle can even come from us, national government, us, European Commission, overburdening the procedures. The obstacle can come from the rentier capturing it, if you're not clever enough. The obstacle can be about shortage of bright policymakers, because this calls for good policymakers. And an obstacle can be more general one, as we said, a failure to understand the difference between this policy and the old, pick the losers, basically. Okay. If you put this together, then and then if you do have weak regional governments, as you happen to have often, exactly where there are troughs, i.e., where things are not happening anyway, so the non-core areas, even though Italy has now a serious problem with past core areas which are not anymore core, and we are in one of those. The stepping back of Veneto along Lombardy and Emilia-Romagna this is not just a policy for lagging regions. This is a policy for regions who where innovation is not taking place. Then I wonder whether the governance that one can put together to tackle in a country like Italy, at least in some places, to tackle these obstacles, is a country where we're at the center of the game, with all the risks that it takes. We put the level of government where somehow we find less shortage of bright policymakers, more chance of people to monitor them through the democratic process, which is in Italy the municipalities, whether they are the big ones or are the small ones. That's not always the case, but it is the case. It can be done. In terms of what we are doing at the moment for small municipalities, they cannot do it by themselves, but you can put them together in alliances. So you could design a governance in which you have an alliance of the democratically elected local elites. Well, why should they accept the transformation? Well, they don't. But if you do come from outside, if you have a strong outsider intervention in these areas, and the game is strategically clear, you offer them a chance. Either you get nothing, but the chance has to be straightforward. Either you get nothing, there are no compromises. Either you get nothing, or you have a chance. This if you get this chance, you can not only get some of the local cohesion policy with the money, which is the only one that is around these days, but you can also get some intervention on education, some intervention on health, that you can experiment on adjustment of the education system. In particular, I keep going on about the education system, which is particularly in this country crucial. Let me just mention one thing. We do have a potential in this country for relaunching a system of istituti tecnici professionali, which we have diminished in terms of their role all over the country. They were the driver for a country which has small enterprises. There's no future for large firms except when state-owned and public sector, but this country's success is there. And when it came through a very strong knowledge linkage with the system of education. Now, this is still there. It's not dead. It is very alive. The quality of these people is enormous. Simply, they often very simply don't specialize in the very domain in which there is A, a potential in the area, B, even inflows of knowledge from outside. Just to give one example, because I want to hit the point of your studying. We need AISRe to work on these things. We were not in Sicily. We were in Barca, in Valtellina. They are doing very badly at the moment. And we're talking near Switzerland and Bolzano. We're not in the south. No, the problem about okay, they're doing very badly. Demographic drop, and there is a fantastic opportunities. They got into tremendous trouble with the wall games, and they sort of killed their territories. And that. Now they have an amazing thing there happening. There is the unique place in the world where, unfortunately or fortunately, there's always two sides. The land is moving. It's moving at the speed of 3 millimeters a day, and it's not just a piece of land. It's 1,000 meters, 1 kilometer of land is moving, and every 150 years it falls down. Now it happens that all the world is interested in what's happening. So you have scientists coming from all over the world, you have monitoring systems which are being introduced in order for people to run away in 3 days' time. It's full of people who are living down there. And so it's all alive. Now, the schools of the areas are specializing in accounting. Okay? They don't study the land. Somebody suggested it was not passed because the general law of the country does not allow to create it unless you have already 90 people who study with that. So this is a very non-complex thing. They are aware of it, just you need to give a kick. They are there. They could create a knowledge linkage which is there. It's not to be invented. So I want to say, because otherwise you think about south of it, this is Valtellina.
All right. Thank you very much, Fabrizio. Very, very well. I would like to finish with a very quick question. First, do you tweet? Any of you do? All right, so if you tweet, you're familiar with this. I'm going to ask you to tweet, but not using your computers, viva voce, about the success of the smart specialization experiment. Smart specialization is relatively new, is not tried and tested so far, and is being implemented at a massive scale. It's been implemented throughout the whole of the European Union more than before. So I want you to go to 2020, when the programming period finishes, and just to tweet a simple answer to a simple but perhaps tricky question. In 2020, are we going to say that smart specialization is a success? Or are we going to have to go back to the drawing board and start again? Who dares to take this challenge? No one? Right, well, thank you very much. And no one wants to take a challenge. I would like to ask you to thank the speakers in the usual way for a very entertaining session.